Gun control groups may be resurrecting a sinister strategy, one that lets them target manufacturers in the firearms industry. Today, we're talking about lawsuits. Hey guys, I'm Tiffany, and you're watching One in the Chamber, the show that arms you with the knowledge so you become a better pro-gun activist. And before we get into this video, please take a second to like, comment, and subscribe to help us defeat YouTube's algorithm. Yes, it's true. Within the past 2 years, billionaire-funded gun control groups have worked with their allies in government to bring forth lawsuits against companies in the firearms industry. To explain our current situation, we'll first need to talk about the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, which was passed in 2005. In 2000, Smith Wesson was facing several state and federal lawsuits. To settle the suits, S&W signed an agreement that was brokered by President Bill Clinton in which the company agreed to implement practices related to their guns. One of those being a provision that 2% of annual revenue would be dedicated towards the development of authorized user technology, also known as smart guns. Other points included agreeing to cut off dealers where guns turned up disproportionately in crime, like a dealer somehow has control over that. Agreeing that S&W's dealers cannot sell at gun shows unless background checks are performed by every dealer at the show. And agreeing that authorized dealers cannot sell weapons attractive to criminals, those being large capacity magazines and semi-automatic assault weapons. The list goes on, and all the points should sound familiar to anyone who has heard talking points from the anti-gun lobby. This agreement reads like a wish list of all their favorites, forced into action by lawyers at the behest of the Clinton administration. There was even an oversight commission that was established to oversee the implementation of the agreement. And in an attempt to get other firearms manufacturers to sign on to the same agreement, politicians like Andrew Cuomo and Eliot Spitzer threatened a death by 1,000 cuts, and that bankruptcy lawyers will be knocking at your door. In response to this weaponization of the courts, Congress passed the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act on October 26, 2005. And before we move on, often this law gets incorrectly labeled as making the firearms industry invulnerable to lawsuits. It does not do that. It simply prevents lawsuits against manufacturers for crimes committed with their products. Here's even Bernie Sanders supporting PLCAA.
Now, the issues that you're talking about is if somebody has a gun and it falls into the hands of a murderer and that murderer kills somebody with the gun, do you hold the gun manufacturer responsible? Not any more than you would hold a hammer company responsible if somebody beats somebody over the head with a hammer. That is not what a lawsuit should be about. And this is part, by the way, I may say, of, folks who do not like guns is fine. But we have millions of people who are gun owners in this country. 99.9% of those people obey the law. I want to see real serious debate and action on guns. But it is not going to take place if we simply have extreme positions on both sides.
Also, the firearms industry isn't the only industry with these types of liability protections either. Vaccine manufacturers are protected against civil liability through the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. Internet service providers are protected against defamation and copyright infringement suits by Section 230. And finally, airline companies were exempted from lawsuits related to the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Okay, so how does this relate to the anti-gun crowd weaponizing lawsuits? It sure sounds like the PLCAA stops all of that. Well then let's fast forward to 2014. In the aftermath of the tragic Sandy Hook shooting, the families of the victims decided to sue Remington, the manufacturer of the rifle used in the shooting. At first, it seemed that Remington would be protected under the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. But due to the local Connecticut law, the Unfair Trade Practices Act, the case was allowed to proceed. And you may have heard about the aftermath. The case was decided in favor of the victims, who claimed that Remington had marketed their rifle directly to the shooter in violation of the Connecticut Unfair Trade Practices Act. As a result, Remington was ordered to pay out $73 million in damages to the victims. And in a reaction, Giffords, a notable gun control group, called the verdict groundbreaking. Giffords filed an amicus brief in support of the petitioners. And in their statement, Giffords celebrated the historic victory as a warning to the gun industry. That warning has come true. In the following months, Michael Bloomberg's gun control group Everytown filed a lawsuit on behalf of the mother of a victim of the Uvalde shooting against Daniel Defense on similar grounds that they targeted Daniel Defense's marketing. And in a similar fashion, witnesses to a mass shooting in Buffalo, New York are suing the manufacturers of the rifle used and the manufacturers of some of the accessories on the rifle, which was modified to be not New York compliant. In addition to this, a judge allowed the lawsuit to also move forward against social media companies. Even more recently, Everytown teamed up with the city of Chicago to sue Glock. Their suit claims that Glock did not do enough to stop the proliferation of switches in Chicago. Switches are devices that turn semi-auto Glocks into machine guns, and these parts are already federally illegal under current law. The Chicago lawsuit is the first to use Illinois' FIRA, or the Illinois Firearms Industry Responsibility Act. Will that lawsuit be successful? Maybe. The city of Baltimore recently just won their suit against Polymer 80, with Polymer 80 paying out $1.2 million in a settlement. That suit was litigated by Brady, another notable gun control group. And in addition, a $10 billion lawsuit against American gun manufacturers filed by Mexico was allowed to proceed. Mexico's co-counsel, none other than the group Global Action on Gun Violence, another gun control group. Starting to see a pattern here? Gun control groups are using the legal system to do what they can't in Congress. Their idea is to disrupt supply and remove the ability to buy guns from law-abiding citizens. Gun control groups are also using the legal system to force ATF to be more aggressive in their regulation of firearms. Recently, California AG Rob Bonta and Giffords Law Center sued the ATF over what they perceived as loopholes in the ATF frame and receiver rule, a rule that gun control groups like Giffords helped push the ATF to release in the first place. And in a wild turn of events, the ATF actually fought back against Giffords, claiming in court that they, Giffords, have no evidence of whether the type of products which are the subject of this disagreement are responsible for any of the meaningful injuries about which they complain. Further stating that the government was relying on decades of classification letters to make the regulations. And of course, the California courts sided with Giffords over ATF, compelling the agency to close the loopholes in the rule. Basically, Democrat politicians teamed up with a gun control lobby to sue ATF so they can weaponize the rulings of Democrat-appointed judges. It looks like they want anti-gun judges to issue rulings to keep the rule in effect by force and help ATF undermine the legal victories against the unconstitutional rule. So there you have it, the legal strategy for the billionaire-funded gun control lobby. But what can you do about it? Well, the simple answer is get involved. Even if you can't fight these things in the courts, much of the reason that these groups are able to push these sorts of ideas in the first place is that there are those willing to accept the anti-gun ideology as the truth. We know that it isn't, but there are those out there that need your help to see that is the case. Sometimes it's as simple as having a conversation, and other times it's bringing friends to the range and showing them how great the Second Amendment is, and it can change their minds. You can at least be sure that we at Gun Owners of America will continue to expose and fight back against the billionaire-funded anti-gun lobby, wherever they are and regardless of whatever underhanded tactics they employ. Anyways, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.